Gentlemen, good evening. I'm Osagina. I welcome you to my talk. You are all invited. The theme that I would want to have a look at is the French Revolution. You realize that most of the problems that the French societies were going through is equally affecting the African countries. And there's a lot of correlation. It is in this regard that I've deemed it befitting to try and bring out what really was the problem with the French society. In the year 1789, the French Revolution started. And here, there was class struggle. The King Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette ruled the country with high-handedness. They had taken the initiative to ignore the people's power, to ignore the sovereignty, and it was indeed very sad. The low class, the peasants, were forced to pay taxes, and heftily. The peasants had to work on roads, and even the tax collectors were so ruthless that some of the peasants ended up having their arms cut for their failure to pay taxes. This created a lot of animosity. Now, when we look at the French society, we have the nobility, greater nobility and the lesser nobility. We had the church. We had also the king and his family. We had also the bourgeoisie, the industrialists. So when you look at all these, each group had its own problem. The greater nobility, the church, and the king and his family enjoyed most of the privileges. But the other lot at the other end of the spectrum, they were downtrodden. They were looked down upon. And the king would allow at his own wish or pleasure that somebody considered an opponent or opposing him would be detained through what was called letter de cachet. You'd end up in prison because the king feels that you should be in the prison. This was not right. And at this particular time, many issues happened. The bourgeoisie were working very hard. Most of them were industrialists. But you see, there was a lot of taxation, a lot on if they had to import materials for their work, they had to pay so heavily. This was affecting them. So we realized that in a state or a country, the power is with the people. People are sovereign. Whatever development that a king or a leader wants to initiate, there should be public participation. They have a right. In the event that is not done, things may go the opposite way. This is exactly what happened in France. The king would not want to listen to anybody. He used colossal sums of money for his leisure trips. And Parliament had not been there on. Parliament was closed for so many years. And you know, it was in the Parliament where members can sit to discuss issues that are affecting the state. This was not possible. Louis XVI cherished and relished a lot of pleasure. And his wife, Marie Antoinette, was the one controlling most of the state organs. So it was like a state that was, despotic powers were evidenced. Then what happened next? At this particular juncture, there came great thinkers, the French philosophers. I remember one of them was Rousseau. Rousseau, his advice was that people should be ruled by their general will. This one had some elements of democracy. Because you can only rule people when they accept that you be their leader. That was the idea of Rousseau. There was also the philosopher Montesquieu. Then there was also Voltaire. Voltaire believed in a strong government. If you are a leader, you must be strong and you must have the foresight. These great French thinkers influenced the people. And they saw that the king that they had was letting them down. So people wanted a change. They wanted a change. They really, really yearned for it. And time was coming, and was indeed coming very soon. There could be a time when you realize that there would be a shortage of bread. There would be no bread in the country. But the king had more than enough to eat. So you see, majority were lavishing, in the palace, while the greater number were languishing in poverty. So you can see, if the people, the subjects are not well looked after, they are going to end up rebelling, and they are going to take up the arms. You would realize that at this particular time, there were even other developments. People had a feeling that they needed to do away with the king, and many groupings came up. The Jacobins and other groups, this group of Jacobins, which was headed by Maximilian Robespierre. They had a feeling that the king had let them down, and they wanted to do away with the king and his entire family. We had great statesmen like Dunstan and several others who felt that a change was inevitable, because now the wheel of power was not for the people. It was just for a few who are enjoying the resources of the country at the expense of the poor people who are suffering. Now, it must also be noted that some of the French people had also taken part in the American War of Independence, and they had had some experience there. So when they came back home, they also influenced the people that if a government is bad, the best thing is to do away with it. So when the French Revolution started, the people had organized themselves. First area, they stormed the Bastille prison and released the prisoners. Next, they targeted the palace. King Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette. By the way, Louis XVI married Marie Antoinette from Austria. Marie Antoinette was the daughter to the king of Austria, and her influence in France caused more harm. People had rejected her. People had also rejected King Louis XVI. So Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, they disguised themselves as some travelers. They wanted to escape. So they disguised by putting on some funny clothes. But when they reached a place, Viennese, they were discovered. People brought them in, and they were tried. And Louis XVI was executed by guillotine. He was killed. The wife was also guillotined. I think this is a good learning for all of us. When you are given some responsibility to take care of the people, enact justice. Be democratic. Listen to the people. And use due diligence to ensure that you can take care of the people well. Many countries in Africa, we have had cases. You can remember in Liberia, when William Talbot was mercilessly butchered by Sergeant Doe and his comrades. They killed William Talbot and was buried immediately. Doe became the strongman of Liberia. And little did he know that as people keep complaining, more problems were on the way coming. It reached a time when Doe was cornered by Prince, and he was also cornered by Taylor. These are people whose relatives had suffered under Samuel Doe's regime. What did they do? Doe was tricked and he was captured. A president was captured and tortured He was killed so brutally, and his remains were left in the open, naked. A president left naked, and in public, we witnessed this. So we have had a lot of these issues in Africa. Do not cling on to power for a very long time. Create room for democracy. Get the people's wish. Get to know that as you lead, there are others who also feel they can give better leadership than you. African leaders, this is a very good point that I want to tell you and get it straight, that don't cling on to power for a very long time. Don't force yourself. Let people choose you. And also, when you are chosen, use your wits. Be brilliant. Ask yourself, I'm taking the mantle of leadership. Am I equal to the task? Serve the people well. Anytime you hear people complain, there must be a reason. Listen to the voices of the people. Huh? I really hold Nelson Mandela, Rohilal, Madiba. This is a man in South Africa who was very simple, a wit, very brilliant, an icon in Africa, and yet he was willing to listen to the voices of his people. Listen to the voices of your people. Help them as much as you can. This is a very good lesson for our African leaders. Let us not cling to power. Let us not use force. Let us not use brutality. Let us not have what we call the deep state. Let us not have police that is brutalizing and then serializing and killing people mercilessly. Let us have the voice of reasoning. Human life, very important. Let us not take lives by taking the advantage that we are leaders. Whatever you do, you will be held accountable. African leaders, please, let us have some sanity. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. This is what I wanted to share with you, and I hope from here we have a lesson to learn. Thank you so much. I'm Amos Agena.